Okay, in this lecture we're going to talk about functions again. In this case we're going to talk about operations on functions, operations such as addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. Just like we do with real numbers, but we're now dealing with functions. What does it really mean to add two functions? Now remember our functional notation here. If we have f of x equals 3x minus 4, and we have g of x here is equal to 2x squared minus 1. You can see the graphs here. Alright, here's the blue one, and here over here the red one. What does it mean to add the two functions? Well, it means that at every point, alright, we take the, for example, if we take the point, let's see our scale here, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you take the point 1, for example, then I can have a value of at 1 for our f function here as being 3 by 1 is 3 minus 4 is negative 1. And if I have g of 1 over here, this would be 1 squared is 1, 2 times 1 is 2, minus 1 is 1. And so when I add those two together, okay, I get f of 1 plus g of 1 gives me 0. And you'll see that at 1, alright, we actually do have a 0 for the addition of the two functions. So in other words, what this really means is we're adding the value of the f function at that point x to the value of the g function at that point x. And we do that for every value of x along here. So it's a point-by-point addition, which means we're really just adding real numbers again. Okay. When we add the functions, of course, this is what we'd get here. So if I look at f plus g of 1, then we'd end up with 2 by 1 squared, of course, is 1. So 2 plus 3, which is 5, minus 5 is 0, which is exactly what we have. Alright, so in other words, here now then is our definition for the addition of two functions. Right, so if I now want to find, say, f plus g of 0, then I just need to find f of 0 plus g of 0, which of course is equal to 3 by 0 minus 4 plus 2 by 0 squared subtract 1, which of course is negative 4 subtract 1, which is negative 5. So that point would be 0, negative 5, which of course you can see is right here at this point here, okay, on the black curve. Alright, so that's how we do that. Now what about subtraction? Well, again we have the two functions. What do we mean by subtracting the two functions? Well, of course, subtraction is really the same as addition. So this is clearly going to be f of x minus g of x. So again, we do a point by point, okay? And if you look here, for example, at x is equal to 1, then of course we can see here what we had up here was negative 1. And we would have been subtracting 1 again, and we would have got negative 2 right here and here. And so you should get negative 2, and of course that's exactly what we do get, which is this point right here. Now the subtraction of the two, of course, is f of g of x is simply 3x take 4 subtract 2x squared take 1, which of course is negative 2x squared, if I put the squared part first, plus 3x minus 4 plus 1 is minus 3. Okay, and that's this one here. And of course, if you can see here, if we look at that, you can see that that's exactly what it is on this curve here. And if you put in 1 in here, you'd get 1 squared is negative 2 plus 3 would be 1, so would be negative 2 plus 3, which would be 1, and that would give me negative 2 as a result, which is exactly what we got. Alright, so let's do another one. Let's suppose I want f minus g of 4, for example. This, of course, then would be f of 4 subtract g of 4. And so in this case here it would be all right, it would be 3 by 4, subtract 4, subtract 2 by 4 squared, subtract 1, and this would give me 12, subtract 4, this will be 16 by 2 is 32, so minus 32, and then plus 1. And so when we get this, all right, we're going to get negative 36 minus 12 is negative 24, plus 1 is negative 23. Okay, and so that would be the point for negative 23 on the black curve. Well, what do we mean by multiplication? So we have two definitions here for subtraction and of course addition. Now for multiplication, we're saying, well, what happens if I now multiply the curves? Well, clearly following our pattern, this would be the product of the two functions together. And this would be the definition of the multiplication of two functions. So of course, again, when we had f of 1, we had negative 1, and when we had g of 1, we actually had 1, so the product of the two should be negative 1. And when I do the product of the two functions, notice that what I get here is this one multiplied by this one. Okay, so let's do that in this particular case. F of times g of x would in fact be 3x minus 4 by 2x squared subtract 1. And when we FOIL this out, I'll get my 6x cubed here, minus 8x squared for the inner ones, outer one minus 3x, and then negative 4 by negative 1 is plus 4, and that would be it, and that's where we get this from. And you can see here that if I put 1 in here, I get 6, minus 8 is negative 2, and subtract 3 is negative 5, plus 1 would be, in fact, negative 1, which of course is 1 times negative 1. So again, this is multiplication. We do the multiplication, it's just simply multiplying the two values of the functions at that point together. So let's look at f of g, say, of negative 2. Well, this will be f of negative 2 times by g of negative 2. All right, which will be, of course, 3 by negative 2, subtract 4, times by 2 by negative 2 squared, subtract 1. So this will be negative, let's have a look here. So this will be 3 by negative 2 is negative 6, subtract 4 is negative 10. And this will be 4, negative 2 squared is 4, 2's are 8, subtract 1 would be 7, and so I'll end up with negative 70. Again, this is the point negative 2, negative 70 on this particular black curve right here. Alright, what do we want to do when we come to division? Well, of course, that's really much the same as multiplication. So clearly we would want to divide the top function divided by the bottom function at that point. Notice here we've got a very important condition here, is that the g of x can't be 0. Alright, and so if we actually do that, you'll notice that here's our f function over the top and here's our g function in the bottom. Okay, so in this case it's 3x, take 4 on 2x squared, subtract 1. Again, if we use our values, of course we'd have f of 1 was negative 1 and g of 1 was equal to 1, so negative 1 over 1 would be in fact negative 1. And if we put that in here, 1, we of course would get 3, subtract 4 would be negative 1, and here of course we get the same thing, we get 2, subtract 1 is 1, so we get negative 1 on 1, which is negative 1. So we can see that it works. So let's have a look at f of g, divide f divided by g of our function, and in this case here we want to find it at the value, say 3, so let's put 3 in here. So this will be f of 3 over g of 3. Alright, so this will be 3 by 3, subtract 4, over 2 by 3 squared, subtract 1. So this will now be 9 subtract 4 over 9, 2 to 18, subtract 1. So I end up with 5 over 17. And of course this is the point 3, 5 on 17. And that would be that point on the black curve. So this is our definition then of dividing two functions. And remember, the provision here means that g of x cannot be equal to 0. So we need to be careful of that.